Can I make just a quick side note before we get into Exodus chapter 20? By the way, your Bible probably opens up like automatically to Exodus 20 when you walk in now, after now 7 weeks of living there for a while. I've had a lot of folks that have caught me and that have said, our world's going nuts. It's like every week, sometimes every 12 hours, there's some historic something that's going on in the country and the world. And people feel it right now. Yeah, it is. It's an opportunity for those of us that walk with God to be able to say, yeah, the world's gone crazy, but that's not where our hope is. It's also the second song that we sing, no thrones, no powers, no dominions, no name is above Jesus' name. And we understand where we are and what's happening in the country, and sometimes we say, I don't understand any of this. But I do know this. When you're sitting in the coffee shop, when you're talking to people at work, when you're catching folks at school in a couple of weeks, sorry to bring up school, by the way. When you're catching folks there and everybody's like, yeah, the whole world's going crazy, it is an opportunity for you to be able to say, yeah, isn't Jesus good? That we can trust him. That in the middle of all the craziness of this world, I believe in a sovereign God who loves me and who's got this. Either God's got this or he doesn't. And if he's got this, then we should trust him. And so we should live that way. So I understand the turmoil, and everybody seems to be kind of griping and complaining and watching and everything else, and everybody's getting more and more stirred up. It's a good moment for us to be able to take a deep breath and say, God's still good, he's still in charge, and I still trust him. Fair enough? All right, Exodus chapter 20. Exodus chapter 20, I want to be able to walk through. This is super straightforward here. Beginning in verse 2, it says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. In other words, I'm God, you're not. I'm the one who took you out of slavery. I know what you used to be like. You're not like that anymore. And so he kind of lays down the predicate of, I'm the one who made the world, so I'm kind of in charge. And then second is, you remember what your life used to be like. That's not what it is anymore. And then he lays out these 10 commandments. Number 8 of those is, you should not steal. Amen, we're done. Okay? No, I mean, it's pretty straightforward on it. To be able to say, okay, this is blunt and clear, but it also reminds you and makes you think about, okay, what was it like in Egypt for that culture and for that society that God's going to lay this down as a statement to say, I need to remind everybody of this one simple thing. It's probably not that much different than what culture is now, quite frankly. I mean, just think about how many words that we have just for stealing on that. So we got theft, break-in, burglary, embezzlement, extortion, heist, holdup, larceny, looting, piracy, robbery, 10-finger appropriation, that's my favorite there, cheating, hustle, lift, pilferage, pinch, plunder, racket, rip-off, score, stick-up, defrauding, taking what's not yours. It's a culture that we live in, quite frankly, right now. If you talk to anyone that works in retail right now, they will talk to you about the term inventory loss. That means shoplifting. But it's a good corporate term for we have inventory loss there. Now, I'm not just talking about and challenging all of us to say, don't go this afternoon, knock off a pot shop, okay? That by the way, don't, but it's bigger than that. It's a cultural issue for us now that it's become okay to say, you know what, they make a lot of money, I need a piece of theirs. And so I'll just take a little bit. And it sets up a culture among our community where you think, where are we going with this? Where does this really lead to in the days ahead, both as a culture and as a family and as an individual? There's a story not long ago from CNN it was May of this year actually. Let me just read this to you. It said, there was a case of Linda Ann Bean, an Oklahoma woman, always nice when we're on national news on this, who was sentenced to 5 years in prison this month for managing an organized theft ring that stole $9 million in property, mostly from CVS. And she actually would give people a list that she would hire people to go in and steal certain products, and then she would sell them online or sell them to other fences that would actually put them all out there. And literally people would walk in and they would steal up to $500 because they knew if you stole $500, you could get away with it. And she made $9 million off of this. until she got caught. And now she's spending some quality time hanging out with other people similar. It's interesting when we walk through all this. Cindy and I, a couple of years ago, I can still remember walking into Dillard's, and as we walked in, two ladies were running right past us, arms just loaded down with stuff, and they jumped in a car and just hustled away. And I thought, I didn't see a bag with their stuff, you know? They seem to be in a terrible hurry. It's a culture that we have, and we got to figure out what we're going to do about it, as far as to be able to set an example for our own families and who we are personally and what that really means for us. Can I begin by a confession? I'm a thief. I was 8 years old. My mom had taken me to Hancock Fabrics for the day on a Saturday, which I have no idea why any mom would be so cruel to spend an entire Saturday with their 8-year-old son at Hancock Fabrics. But she did. So at the end of the day, I guess in my rage of being in Hancock all day, as we were walking out of the store, there was this big bucket of thread that was there, and I grabbed one of them and stuck it in my pocket. I've got no idea why. If you have an 8-year-old boy, you would say, yep, I'm totally capable of that, okay? I grabbed the spool of thread, I stuck it in my pocket, I got in the car, we drove away, and it was probably half a mile later, I thought, I just stole thread. I am a thief. What am I gonna do with this? Because it's like in my pocket, my 8-year-old boy pocket, and so it's like sticking up giant out of my pocket, okay? And I'm trying to figure out how to be able to cover this. And mom's talking to me from the front seat, and I'm trying to be able to cover it in my pocket. And I get to the house, and I think, I'm so busted, I'm gonna be grounded forever because I stole this thread. And then I'm trying to figure out where I'm gonna hide it in the house. And I couldn't figure out a good place where mom wouldn't find it in the house. And then I had a genius 8-year-old boy idea. There's a muddy spot in the backyard where the water runs off the house, and it's always muddy there. And so I told mom, hey, I'm gonna go play with the dog, and ran outside with my spool of thread in my pocket, still hiding it, ran around the steps, got in the muddy spot in the yard, dug a big hole in that muddy spot, and buried the thread there. Whew, got away with it. I literally remember later thinking, what if a cotton plant grows right there? Okay, I'm 8, okay? Gotta give me a little slack. And all I could think was, my mom's gonna walk out there and go, why is a cotton plant growing right here? How peculiar. And then she's gonna dig it up and find that spool of thread at the bottom of it, and I'm gonna be so busted that I stole this spool of thread. I hid this for years. Literally, my mom passed away 2 years ago, and she had Parkinson's, and in the last year of her life, she and I spent a lot of time together, and we had lots of stories back and forth. And during that time period, I said, Mom, I need to tell you your son's a thief. Okay, I just need to get this off my chest. It's been here for 5 decades. I need to just go ahead and tell you what I did. Okay, and she laughed, and I said, Mom, it's not even the worst of it. I was with her dad, my grandfather. We were out on one Saturday morning, and we were at a pancake place, and we were having pancakes, and when we walked out, my grandfather was walking first, and I walked past a table, and somebody had left a tip, but they had left an Eisenhower dollar as a tip. Those are super cool, and so I picked it up off the table. I stole that lady's tip. So I'm just gonna get it all out, okay? As bizarre as that sounds, we all have kind of moments where we go, why did I do something so stupid? Just that thing that I thought I would get away with, but it just hangs on you. And I get a spool of thread. Probably Hancock's has not had a difficult loss year based on the spool of thread. But it was me. I did that. Just a little thing like that. In Scripture, in Joshua chapter 7, there's a story of a guy named Achan is his name, great name. So let me tell you briefly the story. Many of you know the story of Jericho and walking around the walls of Jericho and the shout and the walls come down, they go in and conquer. It's the first city that they go in and conquer in the promised land. Now this is 40 years after the 10 Commandments have been given. Okay, they've lived out in the wilderness. Moses had given the 10 Commandments. Now Moses had died. Joshua was going to lead them into the promised land, and they're going in the first city they're conquering is Jericho. They conquered Jericho, very fortified, tough to be able to conquer that. The next town is called Ai. That's not artificial intelligence, it's just the letter A and I, okay? So that little town of Ai, and they said, the military leader said, we don't need to send everybody on this. This one's a tiny little town. So they go in to conquer Ai, and they get whooped, okay? The Israelites do. And they come back to God, And Joshua's on his knees with all of his military leaders saying to God, oh God, we're in such trouble. It's like we conquered Jericho and we couldn't conquer little tiny Ai. And literally, you can read this passage later, literally God says to him, Joshua, shut up, stand up, I need to talk to you. There's sin in the camp. The reason you couldn't be victorious is because there's sin in the camp. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to literally go take a lot. I want you to gather every person in all the Israelites, one giant valley. I want you to cast a lot for which tribe, and then which clan, and then which family, and then which person. We're going to have a big public outing here. Joshua's like, oh, okay. So they do this whole thing, and the lot finally lands on a guy named Achan. And Joshua says to him, Achan, what have you done? And Achan looks at him, and with all the Israelites gathered around, looks at him and says, yeah, I messed up. When we went into Jericho, the deal was everything when we conquered Jericho belongs to God. Everything. You can't keep anything. Everything belongs to God. It's the first city. It's the first fruits. Everything belongs to God. He said, but I was part of the army that went in. And when I went into this one guy's house, and he had this really cool robe. And I grabbed it. And then I saw he had some gold and silver, and I grabbed that. And I kept them. And then I went back to my tent, and I realized the whole nation has been wandering in the wilderness for the last 40 years. Nobody has new clothes. Nobody does. So I suddenly realized I stole a robe I can't wear. And nobody has money because everybody's been like living out in the wilderness. So I've got money I can't spend. I've got a robe I can't wear. And so I buried it in my tent. Sound like my thread deal? Apparently I wasn't the first one, okay? I had this genius idea. So he buries it in the tent, and they go back to the tent, they dig up the foundation of his tent, and it's like it's all right there. This simple story of something that we really wanted to just hide and say, that was me. I don't know why I did it, I just did it, is the core of this whole thing of thou shalt not steal. It's this essence of, why does God even say this? Well, I think there's some practical reasons that he says it, and it begins with really our heart and how we treat other people. Because when we steal a product, something else from somebody else, we're violating what is really one of the two big commandments, and that is love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. If you take from someone else, you're literally taking what is theirs. You're not honoring that person, whose ever stuff that was. But it could not just be just stuff. It's really don't steal. It could be stealing time. It could be stealing honor. It could be stealing opportunity. It's that you're taking from someone else. You're not honoring them. With them, their name, their reputation, with their things. To steal, to take from them. The second big issue, though, is really this core issue. And it's the issue of whose is everything's now? Is that your stuff or is that God's stuff? The core of this whole issue about thou shalt not steal is a simple acknowledgement that everything in the world belongs to God. Am I right? He made it, it's his, so everything belongs to him. So we have a determination, what are we going to do with his stuff? And what he's chosen to be able to do with his stuff. And the core is this. Paul wrote in Philippians chapter 4, and my God will supply every need of yours according to his riches in Christ Jesus. When we take things that are not ours, we're really sending a message to God. I don't think you're going to pull through this time. I don't think you can really supply my needs. And so I've got to find some other way to supply my needs. So I'll just take, because I don't know if God's strong enough, big enough, smart enough, rich enough to take care of me. So we take. The core of the Ten Commandments is really a core statement of, as he starts in verse 2, I'm God, and I know who you were. I know what you were like when you were a slave. I know what your previous life was like. I redeemed you from that. I pulled you out of what you used to be like and made you into something different. And I'm God. I own everything. Trust me. I can take care of your needs. Years ago, sitting down when we were in seminary, early years of marriage, like most of you probably in the early years of your marriage and starting out, or maybe for some of you right now, we had absolutely nothing. Most of our meals were pancakes, okay? 'Cause pancakes were simple to be able to do, so that was most of our meals were pancakes to be able to get by. At our church that particular Christmas, our church had a tradition that we would, like, you could submit a name of somebody in the church that you thought really had a need, and then the church would like take up an offering and they would help provide for these different families within the church body that had a need. So Cindy and I actually submitted the name of somebody else we were going to seminary with that was as hard up as we were on it, and so we submitted their name in it. And it was really fun because the church, that was one of the names they picked on it for that family to be able to bless them and to be able to help them get through that. So one Sunday we were having pancakes again, and we went to church, and then Sunday night we were at church, and at church Sunday night, that couple caught us and said, hey, y'all want to come over for dinner? Now, literally, before we went to church, Cindy and I had that conversation of what are we going to do tonight to eat, because we had nothing. And we kind of jokingly said, it's probably going to be pancakes on it. And then at church that night, they invited us to come over for dinner, which was awesome. So we went to their house, and they were making spaghetti with meat in it, like a protein was in it. It was great, okay? So we're having spaghetti at their house, and over the meal, while we're eating, they start telling us the story about how the church had blessed them, and this is one of the meals that had been provided to them. And as we're eating that meal with them, all we could think was we were helping bless somebody else, and we got blessed in the process on it. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. He owns everything. He takes care of his own. And if you steal, if you shortcut, you're really saying God's not strong enough to handle this part. I got to be able to do this. There's part of what the earth God doesn't own on the earth. And that's just not true. He does know our needs. He does provide for us. But before you start thinking this is a really nice message for somebody else who's a bank robber in the room who needs this, can I get personal with you? There are a couple cultural terms that have risen up lately. Terms like quiet vacationing, quiet quitting, bare minimum Mondays. Ways to be able to articulate that we're really not really working at work. We're trying to do the minimum amount at work. Do you know what doing the minimum amount at work is? Stealing from your employer. That's what it is. This person is paying you a wage or a salary to accomplish a task, and if you're quiet quitting or quiet vacationing while at work, you're actually stealing from your employer. See, work is not just something we do to get by, not just to occupy our time. Work is God honoring. And when people who walk with God work, other people at work see us and evaluate what it's like to be a Christian based on the work that we do. And they determine, what's it like? Do I want to hire more Christians? Because if I hire a Christian, they're really great workers because they honor God in their work. That's the biblical mandate, is whatever you do, do it for the glory of God and to be able to honor God in your work. If I can even be more specific in it, Paul writes in Ephesians chapter 4, anyone who's been stealing must steal no longer, but must work, doing something useful with their own hands, that they may have something to share with those who have needs. You see, work is designed for you to be able to earn, to be able to take care of your own life, your own family, and to be able to bless others. Work is purposeful and meaningful. Work existed in the Garden of Eden before the fall. Work is not punishment. Work is God's design to fulfill the heart of a person in being purposeful. So whatever spot that God has you in and whatever task that he has you in, you're there for a purpose and a meaning. And when you shortcut and don't work hard at your place of employment, you're stealing from your employer and dishonoring God. By the way, it's the same thing, if I can be the elected guy for a second. If cheating on your taxes is actually stealing from other taxpayers. I mean, cheating on your taxes sounds better than theft, but it's basically the same thing. And people say all the time, well, other people cheat on their taxes. I'm like, yeah, but we're people that walk with God. As Exodus chapter 20, verse 2 says, he is the Lord, and he brought us out of slavery. We used to be like that, and we're not anymore. We do things differently. Now, as a person who serves on the finance committee that writes tax policy, use every single deduction you can, okay? Use them all. But don't cheat on your taxes, because you and I both know in your heart, as you're filing your taxes, you're really thinking, I'm stealing. You may think I don't want to pay this much, but Jesus is the one who actually said, render unto Caesar's what's Caesar's. That wasn't me. And if I can poke just a little harder, there's a prophet called Malachi in the Old Testament. Malachi was actually the very last book in the Old Testament. I call him Malachi, the Italian prophet, but I don't think he was actually Italian. So you got Malachi, and in Malachi, he's having this conversation with the people of God back and forth and challenging them. And in Malachi chapter 3, it's a really interesting interchange that he has with him. Malachi chapter 3, verse 8, he says, will a man rob God? Will a man rob God? Yet you're robbing me. And the people respond back, how have we robbed you? And Malachi responds back, in your tithes, in your contribution. You've been cursed with a curse, for you're robbing me, the whole nation of you. I challenge you, bring the full tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house, and therefore put me to the test, says the Lord of hosts. Test me if I will not open up the windows of heaven for you and pour down a blessing until there's no more need. What's he saying there? He's saying if you're not actually tithing, you're actually robbing God of what is God's. And then he says back to him what I was talking about before. The Lord owns everything. It's not like God's poor and he's out of money and needs a little extra cash. He's saying, if you'll trust me to tithe, I will pour out blessings on you. But I'm going to wait to find out if you trust me. If you'll tithe, I'll bless you. If you don't, I won't. I mean, that's not me saying that. That's Malachi, the Italian prophet, saying that, okay? From Malachi 3. I mean, that's this passage. Interestingly enough, Americans give, on average, 1.7% of their income to nonprofits nationwide. Now, we talk about how generous Americans are, and we're a very generous people. But when you look at what we give to nonprofits, 1.7%. That would include every church, every faith-based entity in the entire country. 1.7%. We're not tithing to God, we're tipping God. And quite frankly, I tip my waiter more than some people actually tithe and give to God, percentage-wise. So the question is, from Malachi, are you stealing from God? The God who said, I will give you 90% if you'll give me 10. Now, again, I know this is a challenge because some folks have never actually given an offering or a tithe. This is a whole new concept to them. And you're probably thinking in your head, holy cow, do you know what my budget is? I can't afford one more dollar to give to anything. I can't even make my car payment this month. Yeah, I've been there. That time before that Cindy and I were talking about eating lots of pancakes, we were tithing then. And we watched God meet all of our needs according to his riches and glory. We watched him meet everyone. I've had much and I've had little, and I've watched God be faithful in all of those moments. So the question becomes, do you trust him with everything? With how you work, with how you give, with what you do. Do you trust him? You may or may not know this, but Deuteronomy does the whole 10 Commandments all over again. It's like if Moses, he said it once in Exodus, and then he comes back in Deuteronomy, he's like, let me say it all over again. So literally, it's the same list in Deuteronomy chapter 5. That he comes back through and walks through the whole list of the 10 Commandments. But it's a little different. After that, Deuteronomy's later. It's a later book, so it's probably a decade or so written later than Exodus. And you can hear Moses still thinking about it. And he adds a little more to it to say, let me explain this a little bit more. So Deuteronomy 5, he goes through the whole thing, including thou shalt not steal. It's in the list, number 8, same as it is in Exodus 20. But then in Deuteronomy chapter 6, very next chapter, he adds in this, These are the commands, decrees, and the laws the Lord your God directed me to teach you to observe in the land that you're crossing in the Jordan to possess, so that you, your children, and their children after them may fear the Lord your God as long as you live, by keeping all his decrees and commands that I give you. Isn't that interesting? It's like if you want to raise good kids and good grandkids, then honor God with your life. And then the second thing he brings up, he says, these commands and decrees I give you so that you may enjoy a long life. And then he keeps going, hear Israel, be careful to obey so that it may go well with you, and that you may increase greatly in a land flowing with milk and honey, which it's just my weirdness. Every time I think about a land flowing with milk and honey, I also think there had to be cow poop and bees there as well. But you can't have milk and honey without cow poop and bees, okay? So Moses is laying this out to him. He goes, these commands that I'm giving you are not just random commands. These commands that I'm getting you are actually so it'll be a blessing to your children when you live them, and so that they will live them, and so that you'll have a long life on this earth, and so that you will receive the blessings of God. You see, the 10 Commandments are kind of like the stripes in the rumble strip on the highway. You know what I'm talking about? You're driving down the highway, you scoot over a little bit, you're on the stripe, and you go scoot over a little bit forward, you get to that rumble strip, and it's warning you, hey, you're out of the lane, to be able to get back in the lane. Now, can you drive across the rumble strip and drive into the ditch? Yes, you can. Not a good idea. But the 10 Commandments is kind of like that stripe and rumble strip to warn you, hey, you're getting off track here. You're about to head into the ditch, and your life is about to be destroyed. Sin is sin, not because God randomly picks certain things and says, that looks fun, I think I'll make it sin. Sin is sin because it destroys us. And the 10 Commandments sits out there as the rumble strip to say, when you start to cross into this, your life is about to go into the ditch and be destroyed. It's going to destroy you and your family. Stop. And if you will, get back in the lane, I'll bless you. I'll bless your children. I'll bless the generations ahead of you and behind you. Trust me. It's an interesting passage, isn't it? Deuteronomy 5 recounts the 10 Commandments. Deuteronomy 6 says, oh, by the way, if you do these things, you'll be blessed. And then Deuteronomy 7, just a quick statement. He said this, for you are the chosen holy people to God the Lord. The Lord your God has chosen you out of all the peoples on the face of the earth to be his people, his treasured possession, to be his. When did he say this to them? God said that to them while they were still in the desert wandering, where they were still deciding if they were going to actually follow the 10 Commandments, when they were still determining, am I going to do this? God looked at them and said, I chose you. I call you my treasured possession. I love you. And I want to help you. It wasn't to condemn. It was to call. You see, the law, when the law was laid down, was not to lay down a heavy burden on us. The law was there to show us I'm sinful. As I've already admitted, I'm a thief. It was there to show me my sin. And God was standing there to say, yeah, I know about your sin, but I chose you. I call you my treasured possession. I love you, and I will forgive you if you'll let me. And I will help you know how to get out of the ditch that your life is in into a better path. That'll be so much better. Thou shalt not steal. We all have. That's our problem. But it's good to hear God say, I still love you. I'm still calling you, and I'll still forgive you. Come. Let's get back on the right path again. Can I just pray over us for a second? Why don't you bow your heads? I don't know what God's saying to you. There's no way I can know that. But would you just spend a moment in quiet and to say, God, what do I do with this truth? What do I do with this? Just a moment between you and God. The law's not our enemy, it's our guide. It shows us how much we really need God's help. It reminds us again that the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ. The law lays a marker down for us to say, are you stealing from your employer? Stop. Honor me with your life and your time. Are you robbing God? That you give God $10 every once in a while and say, God, here's a tip for you, but won't really honor him with your tithe? Stop robbing him and see what happens. Maybe you do have a secret life that's out there that you think this is going to come out at some point, just like it did for Achan in Joshua chapter 7. This is going to come out and collapse my family. Why don't you confess it? Whether it's theft or whether it's something else, people that have a secret hidden sin and secret hidden life, it always comes out. Why don't you confess it and stop now and see what God does in the days ahead? Or perhaps you're a person that came into church today. You don't know God. Obviously, you're interested in God. Obviously, you're sitting here on a beautiful Sunday morning. You've got an interest in the things of God, and they're like, okay, it's not even the right preacher that's here. It's not even the good guy. It's not Brian. It's me filling in. And then you're thinking, we're talking about the 10 Commandments and stealing today, but in your heart, all you can think is, I don't even know that I know God. Today's a good day to know him. You know what you've done in your past. So does God. And he still made sure you were in this room to hear this one truth. You are my treasured one. I chose you. I love you. I know who you used to be. And I want to redeem you out of that. Exodus chapter 20, verse 2. He is the Lord. And he called you out of slavery and out of your past. Would you let him today? If you've never come to know Jesus before, you're interested in God, obviously, but you've never come to know him, would you do something crazy right now? Would you just look up at me so you and I could be eye to eye for a second? Everybody else look down, but if you're interested in knowing more about God, just look at me so we catch eyes real quick. I'm just looking around the room. All right, I see you. Yeah, I see you. Yeah. Yeah. See you. Listen, the most remarkable thing happened in my life when I prayed and asked Jesus to come into my life. I didn't become perfect. I'm still not perfect. But God is doing a work in my life, and he's helping me understand his word to be able to keep out of the ditches so my life is not destroyed, so I don't destroy my family's life. If you've never come to know him, you can pray and ask him into your life just like I did years ago for me. To say, God, I need your help. I need your forgiveness. So if you're ready, why don't you pray a prayer just like this right where you're sitting right there. Just pray, Jesus, I'm sorry. I need you. I hear that you want to forgive me, and I need your forgiveness. Would you come into my life and take control? I want to start over with you.